initial introductory presentation that you did, Dr. Moyale, where you showcased the different statistics. Maybe the person wanted to understand why is it that there is a gap.
I wish he had explained what gap, because it is a gap in terms of the supply is we don't have enough. I think that is the point probably, or it depends on what we are looking at. The consumption of broilers, for example, in the country, we have a surplus. I would say we have a surplus of broilers, but when it comes to indigenous chicken, we have a deficit. You look at I think the broilers is because they are consumed mostly in urban areas, and indigenous chicken, they are preferred probably by all Kenyans, and the demand is higher, and therefore we don't have enough supply. And that's why the price is even high. But when you look at the eggs, their demand varies with the seasons. Currently, we have a deficit of eggs, but at times we have a surplus in terms of, because of the influx from the neighboring countries. But so the gap will depend on what you are looking at and what you want to address. If it is a deficit, then it means you produce more. If there's a surplus, then you need to do more of marketing so that there's a consumption and even export of the same. So it depends on what you define the gap, then we can see how we can address it.
Okay, thank you. There's also a question about requirements for exporting poultry meat. Maybe you can touch on that. I think this comes from the slide where you showcased opportunities in poultry production.
Okay. The requirement is part of the requirements are from Kenya Bureau of Standards, and other requirements are from the veterinary service, the veterinary service, director of veterinary services. So when it comes to KEBS, they have a detailed procedure, and they do quality. For them, it's quality assurance. So they have procedures which can be obtained on their website on what to do when it comes to the product. But with now the export itself, one will need export health certificate from the veterinary service. That is from the director of veterinary services, and the offices are located at Kabete. The other thing that you'll need is a processing license from the same director of veterinary services. They normally inspect your facility to ensure that all requirements are met.
Okay.
So that is the hygiene, the processing standards, the production quality management, before issuing that processing license. Otherwise, one can outsource an already export license to like Kenya Meat Commission. But now I don't know if the military taking over it might not be possible. Maybe quality meat packers, they can do, if they subcontract, they can do for one. Otherwise, one will need to have a processing license for him to be able to process and export meat. Then the other requirement is a processing license, which is automatically given to all food processing processing hazard analysis and critical control point certificate holders. There's what we call HACCP. That's hazard analysis critical control point certificate holders. Normally, it's a quality assurance procedure, and it's a lengthy process before you get that certificate. So once you get that certificate, you will be issued with a processing license, and then you can be able to process and export. So each shipment is accompanied by a health certificate from the DVS, that's the Director of Veterinary Services, and then you'll have a certificate of origin. Every shipment will be accompanied by a certificate of origin from the KRA and the Customs Department or Kenya Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And then the importing country has other requirements. So you need to know each country has specific requirements. You need to know which requirements that country needs. So it's a whole list of processes, and I might not be exhaustive in my response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Muyale. I think this is a very extensive topic. Farm Kenya can organize and bring a facilitator for the same and educate our farmers who are interested in the poultry export market, where we can have maybe a 1 hour or 1.5 hour session on how to access the export markets. Next up, we have a question from Ben in the chat segment where he asks, can some antibiotics destroy developing eggs? Maybe Dr. Victor Yama, you can help respond to this in terms with overuse of antibiotics and their effect.
No. Well, a good question. I think the important thing to understand is that medications have an impact on embryo development. And so there are medicaments, I might not have them off the top of my head, but there are medicaments that will actually affect hatchability, because that's where development occurs. But there are also medications that will affect fertility. And so that is why I said in my comments that it is important to have a veterinarian, a competent veterinarian, looking at what medication is being given at what point. Because other than the public health implication, there are impacts on productivity that are known, and it's something that we can pick up later.
Okay, thank you. On the same line, Ben again asks, what's the recommended ratio of feeders and drinkers to the number of birds? I think this is as a result of the first freedom, that is the freedom from hunger and dust.
Yeah, good question. It depends. I want to answer it this way. There are also various types of feeders and drinkers. You have automatic feeders, you have nipple drinkers, you have bell feeders, the bell ones, feeders. So essentially what we say, if you're using the long wooden one, that is like a tube. No, that is the long one, that the Muarati one that they put there. You need to put, I think it's an inch, 1.5 inch per bird on each side, so that you have enough space for that. Then in terms of tube feeders, the round ones, the metallic ones, tube feeders, you can do up to 30 birds. Yeah. Remember, space also, the spacing that you give also depends on where you are. In the cold areas, you squeeze the animals a bit tighter. In the hot areas, the animals need slightly more space, just like you and I. But when you are starting, you can do the chick feeder, that looks like a tray. The chick feeder can take up to 100 chicks per feeder, the standard chick feeder. But normally when you start feeding chicks, the day you bring them in, it's better that you put the feed on crepe paper, so that the chickens can easily identify the feed. And normally feed is put immediately that they arrive. And then progressively then move them to the tray, the feeder tray, and then move them to the bottom of the round feeder. That's one of the things that you look at. Then in the new intensive systems, you can also have chain feeders, which is an automatic feeding system where the chain then distributes the feed through the house. And I think there's a ratio, I think it's about 1.5 to 3 inches per bird, and depending on the age of the bird and the stage of production. In terms of waterers, the automatic bell drinkers, which are the big red ones that classically are seen in chicken houses, is also one for about 30 birds maximum. And then for the ones that you can, the chick drinkers, it's about one for about 50 birds. But I also want to say that if you're a small scale farmer with less than 100 birds, if you do the mathematics of 100 chicks per feeder tray, then it means you'd have one. So normally we say, even if they are less than 100, then the mathematics doesn't work. You need to have at least 4 feeders in the house, so that they have each quarter of the house must have a feeder, so that the chicken does not walk too far. The math only works when you're having a lot of chickens. If it's less than 100 chickens, then you still need 4 feeders and 4 drinkers in the house. I hope that is clear.
Thank you, Dr. Ayamo. Ben, your hand is up. Maybe please unmute and you can ask your question.
Ben drink as it is, I can see.
Okay, I think you've addressed his question because he has lowered his hand. The last question that we have is from Agri Simiyu, and he asked, for incubation, is there a way to gauge the age of an egg, especially when you're buying from a supplier? Dr.
I don't know whether Moyale wants to go for it, but my long and short of it would. Okay, Moyale, answer. I can see you want to answer it.
It's an interesting question. It is not possible to know the age of the egg unless the farm that is breeding has a standard way of labeling eggs, which we recommend that every egg should be labeled, and the date of hatch, the date of lay is normally indicated on the egg. Then you can be able to tell the age of the egg. So we recommend the suitable eggs will be not more than 10 days old. And of course, I've heard some people talk of how the floating system, where you put eggs in water and they float or what. But you know, when you temper with the temperature of the egg, then also you're affecting the hatchability of that egg. So you don't do, if you are buying 1,000 eggs and you want to put them in water, all of them trying to test which one floats, which one sinks, then you'll be actually affecting the quality of those eggs. That is my take.
Thank you,
Doctor. Though before there's the other way of doing it is candling, but eggs that you can't candle eggs that are not yet been incubated, so it's not easy to candle and tell which the age of the eggs. I mean, it's very hard to tell.
Okay.
Dr. Yamo.
Dr. Yamo, any?
I think, Moyale, you've done it well. I was just going to say that for at that breeding level, when you're looking for hatching eggs, your number one thing that helps you is having a relationship with your supplier. Then you understand their system. I do audits for other farms, and one of the things we encourage is, if I'm going to start hatching and I'm starting a hatchery, the first thing that you do is find out who are the people who supply eggs at what cost. Then engage them and they would allow you to go and evaluate their system so that you understand how, when they code, what that code written on the egg or on the egg tray, what does it mean? Does it give you a date when the egg was hatched, how old it is? Because all those things are important. So I think part of it is just having a relationship. The next level then is you yourself then having your own either contracted farmers who can then give you hatching periodically, and you know when you collect and when they were hatched, and then ultimately having your own breeder farm. But I know people who have had hatcheries without breeder farms and have collected the eggs by just understanding the system of the suppliers that they're working with. I think that's my only addition on that.
Thank you, Dr. Ayamo. I think it goes back to what Dr. Paul Kangele was talking about, record keeping. If your supplier maintains proper records, I think with the records you can be able to address that, as well as the what has been suggested by Dr. Victor and Dr. Moyale. There's a question I had skipped from A. Kinywa, and his question was, how do you control flies in cage farming, and how do you manage droppings? And he also asked, how many grams is adequate for caged layers?
Now, I know Dr. Yamo will not want to answer this one.
I might still want to answer it.
You might still. I know what you'll. I'm imagining. Anyway, personally, I'm anti-cage crusader. So really, because one of the things that I find common in cages is the fecal droppings and the way the houses smell, and I don't like that environment. it is, to me, it's a welfare abuse of animals, especially of chicken or layers. But nevertheless, in handling the fecal droppings in advanced economies, and remember I talked about technology, and we are yet to get there, where there are some conveyor belts that will move the fecal droppings. So in that case, you find the droppings are moved by mechanically from the bottom of the cages, and therefore there's no challenge. But the moment you have fecal material accumulating, then flies and smell and all those other kinds of welfare concerns come in. And managing flies, I've seen farmers try to apply the fly the chemicals the chemicals that kill flies, and they don't work because the smell is too strong for the flies to go away. So personally, I don't have an answer to that one. Probably somebody who has dealt with cages for quite some time can be able to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moyale. Dr. Victor?
I think that those are the reasons why cage systems are being phased out, or rather were phased out in the developed world, and you're ending up with those cages in Africa. Essentially, it is how do you then manage the waste from that environment? How then do you manage the insects that get into that environment? And if your ventilation is not very good, then you end up with a multi-layers of challenges. Because of that ammonia, you end up with respiratory problems, which then has a totally different outplay in that production system. This is the reason why internationally we are saying we need to move away from battery cage systems into deep litter system because of some of those challenges. But essentially, the other thing that I think farmers need to understand is that what are you producing the eggs from? There's a slide I usually use, which I didn't put today because I wanted to keep it light. If you're producing eggs to take into a market, then which market are you targeting? If you're targeting the high value market, which is what we need to be targeting, then you need to do the right thing according to international practices. And that's why even in this country, big supermarkets have begun saying that by 2025, latest 2030, they will not be accepting eggs from the battery cage production system. The question then we need to ask ourselves as Kenyans is, if big supermarkets are already talking this way and they're sitting in this country, they're sitting in Nairobi, they're sitting in Eldoret, I can see one has just moved into Eldoret, they're sitting in Kisumu, what are we saying as Kenyans? Are we saying that those markets will then be importing eggs to put into that value chain? Then it means that what Moyale was talking about, opportunities in the poultry industry, we've lost it. I hear farmers complaining about eggs coming from Uganda. But Uganda is part of the East African community, and Uganda is part of what the president signed about the African trade area, 54 African countries. If we can't even manage that small one, how are we going to manage when big international supermarkets and fast food restaurants start saying the Kenyan egg producer is not meeting our standards, we must bring eggs from Europe? Remember, this thing is about trade, and trade has very serious negotiated rules that we must abide by. On what you're doing in terms of the production system. Asanteni.
Thank you. And lastly, from Agri Simiyu, as for feeds, other than usual commercial feeds, what can farmers utilize locally from the farm, whether planting or byproducts, to add to the commercial feeds?
Need to add or to complement, because if you want to add to commercial feeds, it means you want to adulterate. Remember, the commercial feeds is a complete diet. It's been formulated to provide all the nutritive requirements of the bird. So, if you want to add in, then which means you are tampering with the formulation, and therefore you are creating an imbalance of either proteins, carbohydrates, or amino acids. That's a form of adulteration of the feed. So unless you want to complement, in which case you want to give them the commercial feeds, and besides that, you want to provide other feeds for them. And mostly in some intensive setup, that is what you will do. where you give them partly the commercial feeds and then partly you can allow them to range. So I will say, if you want to, you either make your own feeds on the farm, or you buy the commercial feeds. And if you want to make your own feeds on the farm, we have nutritional experts who can help you to formulate a diet that can be near complete. It might not be complete, but near complete, to provide for the needs of the bird. But adding other raw materials into the already formulated feed is adulteration, and that affects the quality of the feed. So it's like when I've seen people they have these commercial feeds and then they add in DCP. That means you're giving more calcium to the bird and they end up having hypercalcemia. You find the birds are developing some skeletal problems because of too much calcium, and therefore it has to be deposited somewhere. So it affects the structures, the skeletal structure of the bird, because of too much of calcium. So adulteration of feeds is one of the problems that probably we have in this country, and you don't get more eggs, you don't get the right weights, and you end up with too much of something becomes poisonous. And for example, if you add in too much of omena, that is high protein, you'll end up having cannibalism, birds eating each other. And or too much of energy diet. I mean, energy diet is the one that too much of energy, like too much of maize, they end up cannibalism, not omena. Too much of energy leads to cannibalism, and that is because you've tampered with the diet, the balance of the diet. So I propose you if you want to do your own formulation, well and good, but adding into the commercial feeds, I think it is not recommended. Thank you. Joki, you are gone.
Oh, sorry. Hi. I forgot to unmute. Sorry about that. I was saying thank you so much for your answer. And I was saying clearly from the questions that are coming in from our farmers, we need to organize subsequent sessions where we will address each topic in details. For example, feeds and feed management, health management. As you can see, there are so many questions on diseases and the likes. Antimicrobial resistance is another one, including topics like vaccination, housing, finance, and how to access the export market. With that, I'd like to make my closing remarks and thank each and every person who participated today. We shall be providing this webinar. As you have seen, we have been recording it. We shall be providing it on our Farm Kenya platforms. Of course, we shall share the notes and the questions that have arisen from here, questions and answers later on via email. And thank you so much. Special thanks to our panelists, that is Dr. Moyale, Dr. Victor Yamo, and Dr. Paul in absentia, for your time. We really appreciate this. And I'd like to mention that this webinar has been facilitated by Kenya Veterinary Association. Also thank them. And Dr. Moyale is the chair, and I'll let him share his closing remarks, and we shall call it a successful day. Over to you, Dr. Moyale.
Okay, thank you, Joki and KTN, Farmers TV. It is actually a pleasure to give back to the society. We, as an association, we have decided to reach out to be seen by our stakeholders. Farmers are actually our key stakeholders, and we are glad to be part of this process. We are encouraging our members to come out, to come and present on diverse topics. Veterinary practice is a very wide field, and we want to be seen out there, and we want farmers and animal keepers and animal lovers to benefit from this wide pool of knowledge. And therefore, I want to thank KTN and Joki and Paul for giving us an opportunity to bring our members to the limelight and to expose them to media. Some of us, we've never even been on TV, and the courtesy of KTN Farmers TV, our members are able to develop the skills and experience of being on television, and I think it's a good thing. And I'm happy that farmers are also getting to know some things, that are asking questions and being answered. And going forward, I'm sure we are going to be having this kind of interactions very, very frequent, because what goes around, a good thing is always mentioned everywhere. My encouragement is to the farmers to always try to engage the veterinarian when it comes to issues of to do with animal, especially animal health. Let consult. Some of these consultations might be free, and if they are paid for, I don't think it's expensive for you to pay for a service that is valuable. Otherwise, I'm glad that we have had this, and Farm Kenya is really a good platform. Encourage other farmers to tune in and to be part of these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moyale. He's the chairman for KVA. Thank you so much, Dr. Victor, for your trainings. I can see the participants, especially Chairman 1000, says thank you to all the panelists and the host.